You know the image, right? A man, a giant boulder, and a hill that goes on forever. It's probably one of the most powerful symbols of struggle we have. But the story of Sisyphus, well, it's so much more than just a punishment. It's a really deep myth about defiance, about meaning, and, believe it or not, about spiritual failure. Okay, let's get into this and really unpack all its incredible layers.
So, this is the big question, the paradox at the heart of it all that we're going to explore. How can a sentence that was designed for pure, absolute hopelessness actually be seen as a win? I mean, that question alone completely flips the script, turning Sisyphus from just a sad story into a potential hero. So, before we even get to the punishment, we have to talk about the man himself. And Sisyphus, well, he wasn't some poor, tragic victim. Oh no, he was the king of Corinth, and he was known all across Greece as the cleverest, most cunning guy alive. He was so clever, in fact, that he managed to outwit the gods themselves. Not once, but twice.
I mean, just think about the sheer audacity here. First, when death, personified as Thanatos, comes to get him, Sisyphus tricks him into showing how the chains work, and then claps him in them. And for a while, nobody on Earth could die. It was chaos. Then later, after he's finally dragged to the underworld, he convinces Persephone to let him pop back up to the world of the living, just to punish his wife for not giving him a proper funeral, which was a trick he'd planned with her all along. He then goes and parties for years before they have to forcibly drag him back. As you can imagine, the gods were furious, absolutely livid. And they couldn't just kill a man who had already beaten death. Nope. They needed something way worse. So they came up with a punishment that wasn't about physical pain. Not really. It was about crushing the soul with pure, pointless, mind-numbing repetition. And this is where the real twisted genius of the revenge comes in. Pushing the rock is agony, sure. But the real torture? It's that moment he almost makes it. That tiny glimpse of the top, immediately followed by the boulder crashing all the way back down to the bottom. It's a perfect cycle of hope and despair, designed to completely break his spirit for all of eternity. And for centuries, that was pretty much the story. A cautionary tale about a trickster who finally got what was coming to him. But then, in the 20th century, this French philosopher, Albert Camus, he looked at this myth and he saw something completely different. He saw a hero. Okay, so to get what Camus is saying, you really have to understand his big idea, the absurd. You know that feeling we all get sometimes? We're desperately looking for purpose, for answers, for some kind of meaning in life, but the universe just stares back. It's silent. It doesn't care. That conflict, that huge gap between our need for meaning and the universe's total lack of it, that is the absurd. So here's the crucial part. Sisyphus is living at the absolute peak of this absurd condition. His job is the very definition of meaninglessness. But his heroism, for Camus, comes from one simple thing. He knows it. He's not fooling himself. He is fully, crushingly aware of just how futile his situation is. Now, Camus focuses on a part of the story we usually just skip over, the walk back down the hell. He says this is where the victory happens. As Sisyphus walks down, without the weight of the boulder, he has time to think. He sees his fate for what it is. And by accepting it, by choosing to walk down and pick that rock up again, he's basically spitting in the gods' faces. In that moment of clear-eyed awareness, he owns his punishment. He stops being a victim and becomes a rebel. And this leads us to one of the most famous and, frankly, startling conclusions in all of modern philosophy. Camus says that this conscious struggle, this defiant embrace of a totally meaningless task, becomes its own reward. The effort is the meaning. And that is why, against all logic, against everything we think we know, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. But hold on. Just when you think you've got Sisyphus all figured out as this cool existential hero, there's this other, much older tradition that sees him in a completely, and I mean completely different light. So now, let's look at the Masonic interpretation, which pretty much flips Camus' entire idea on its head. You see, in Masonic allegory, especially in the higher degrees of something called the Scottish Rite, Sisyphus is the absolute opposite of a role model. He is what you are taught not to be. He represents a kind of deep, profound spiritual failure. From this point of view, Sisyphus's cleverness wasn't a good thing at all. It was just intellectual pride, sheer arrogance. He misused his knowledge, his secrets, for his own selfish reasons, just like he betrayed the secrets of the gods. The famous Masonic scholar Albert Pike even saw him as a symbol of a soul enslaved by its own desires, constantly working to satisfy passions that can never ever truly be fulfilled. What's really fascinating here is how every single part of the myth gets a symbolic meaning. The boulder isn't just a rock, it's the weight of your own unchecked passions, or maybe the burden of your past mistakes. The hill, that's the difficult path towards self-improvement and spiritual growth. And Sisyphus's failure to ever reach the top, well, that's a direct warning. Without humility, all your hard work is for nothing. This comparison really gets to the heart of the difference. Sisyphus's work is absurd, it's pointless. Masonic labor, on the other hand, is all about taking something rough, what they call a rough ashlar, and through patient, focused work, turning it into a perfect ashlar, a perfect cube that's ready to be used to build a symbolic spiritual temple. One is pointless repetition, the other is productive, meaningful creation. So, what are we left with? We have these two powerful, completely opposite ways of reading the exact same story. He's either a hero of the absurd or a symbol of spiritual failure. How do we even begin to reconcile these? And maybe more importantly, what does this ancient myth really mean for us today? Let's just put them right next to each other. For Camus, Sisyphus accepts his fate, and that struggle becomes a heroic act of rebellion. The lesson is to find your own joy and meaning in the struggle itself. For the Masons, Sisyphus is a slave to his fate. His struggle is fruitless and repetitive, and the lesson is that pride and selfishness will always, always lead to pointless work. And this, right here, is why this myth is still so powerful. It's not one or the other. Sisyphus holds both possibilities within him. He's kind of like a mirror. Whether you see a hero or a failure often says a lot more about your own worldview than it does about the myth itself. It forces us all to ask, what is our own labor actually for? Because at the end of the day, we all have our boulders. We all have that task, that thing we have to push up a hill day in and day out. That struggle, that part is a given in life. The only real question is what we do with it. Is our effort a conscious act of defiance that builds our own meaning, or is it just a repetitive cycle, driven by passions that ultimately build nothing at all? The struggle is guaranteed. The meaning, well, that's up to you.